So you are doing this because for some reason you done messed up and you shouldn't have messed up. This is about jury selection, which is the other type of voir dire. And as you can see, pretty much all your group is now responsible for is filling in this square filling in these squares, right? What you are going to do is you are going to practice voir dire jury selection for your side, whether or not you're the prosecution and defense, and you can delete the other one, but just note that you would have to have all of this filled in, plus this, or all of this filled in, plus this, depending on which one you fit in with, and then all of the extra information that you might need might be on these lower slides. But with that being said, we probably talked about how voir dire kind of works, but we have to talk about how it specifically applies to you, just because, well, I want to make sure you know what you need to know in order to do this correctly, right? And so as we said in class, voir dire only happens because of this case called Batson versus Kentucky, wherein someone wanted to object to people that were on his jury, and then he wasn't allowed to for whatever reason, which led to a constitutional challenge, which clarified how we dismiss people off juries. One of those types is called a peremptory challenge. A peremptory challenge, as we said in class, is when you do not need a reason for dismissing someone. You just don't like how they look, or some other reason you can dismiss a certain amount of people. And in North Carolina, that's 7. Right. On the flip side, though, a challenge for cause, while seemingly easy, is not as easy as it seems. Right? Like, we could kick someone off a jury for any of these 3 reasons, and pretty much these are the only 3 reasons that you could kick someone off a jury. But in order to do it, it's not as easy as saying, like, hey, do you think a person is guilty? Right? Like, that might seem like the obvious way, but in order to perfectly do it, well, we are going to do what you have to do. But the 3 reasons you would get a challenge for cause is not race, ethnicity, or religion. It's whether or not they think a person is guilty or innocent beforehand, right? Hey, do you think Officer Chauvin's guilty in the George Floyd case? If someone said yes, well, then that would be the start of it. The second one, they couldn't render a verdict. If we wanted a person to get the death penalty, well, if we were going to give the death penalty and a person goes, I can't give someone the death penalty, they'd get kicked off the jury. The third one is they can't render a fair or impartial verdict. Maybe you know Mr. LeBlanc, and because of that, you wouldn't be able to find him guilty even though you have all the facts. Well, then there you go. Those are the only 3 reasons that a person should be kicked off for a challenge for cause. So let's practice it. And, you could follow along and do it yourself, but just know that you are responsible for doing this because you guys got in trouble. How to get a challenge for cause. The very first thing that you would do is you repeat the juror's bias or impaired position. So in jury selection, we're asking a whole bunch of questions, and we know what's involved. So in this specific case, we know that we're putting someone trying to charge someone with some sort of drug possession. And so one group that you might want to dismiss, if you were the prosecution, is people that might be sympathetic to drug users, right? You're the prosecution, you want to put this guy in jail for drug possession, then anyone that's ever had some sort of run-in with drugs or knows someone that has a run-in with drugs might be more sympathetic. And because of that, we want to kick them off. So this is what we would do. We'd ask a question first and foremost, right? Does anyone have experience with drug possession, right? And then one of the people might say, well, my son was a cocaine addict. I despise someone even remotely involved in it, right? You would want to make sure that you repeat those same words. So you say your son was a cocaine addict and you despise people that are remotely involved with it, right? Then you're going to want them to continue to talk, right? The more that they talk, the more that they kind of kick themselves off the jury. So you go like, tell me more about that. Oh, like, what was your son's problem? Well, he was addicted to cocaine. How did he get addicted into using cocaine? Well, he was meeting up with some friends. How long did he use cocaine? How is he today? All of these questions are open-ended so that the person can really explain the depth of their impairment. If you cut them off after the first one, that's great, but maybe they would have said more to get the challenge, right? At the end of the day, it's the judge's choice to kick someone off the jury, and so you want to make sure you have as full proof of a challenge as possible, and that's why we let them elaborate. After we let a person elaborate with open-ended questions, we do the next thing. And this is a kind of tricky thing, you acknowledge the impairment, you try to make it seem normal. If you try to make it seem normal, then what our goal is to get other people who might be kicked off for the same reason, right? So we go like, look, I'm very sorry to hear that. It sounds very sad. Thank you for your honesty. Does anyone else on this jury have a similar story where they were struggling because of a family member or themselves also had some sort of drug condition, right? By saying it that way, we aren't judging people. People don't want to share if they're getting judged, but we also want people to feel like they can share. And so anyone else that had some sort of person with some sort of drug connection might start talking. And so like the next person goes like, hey, my son, we have the cocaine guy. My son deals with cocaine. My son's addicted to alcohol, right? Or maybe I'm an alcoholic and I drink a lot of alcohol. It's a problem. I've been to rehab X, Y, and Z, right? And when I was in rehab, I made a lot of friends, and a lot of those friends also had issues with substance abuse, right? And so now we have two people that might get this challenge for cause. We have one guy because of cocaine and one guy because of alcoholism and subsequent rehab programs. The next thing that we do is we lock the jurors' biased answers into a challenge for cause. And so we're going to do leading questions. And those leading questions are going to emphasize the views and the strengths of those views. And you go, so now that we've established that your son had a drug problem, right? How do you feel about people charged with cocaine, right? Or people charged with a drug charge? Right? Hopefully, because your son had a drug charge, do you feel strongly about cocaine? Right? That's a leading question. Because you went to rehab, do you have preconceived notions about people charged with drug usage? Right? Both of those show that they have either one of the three types of impairment that was on that first slide. By saying yes or no questions, right? We're locking them in. Then you have them suggest why their feelings might justify a challenge for cause. And so now we go, because you have been in rehab, right? Would you identify the defendant who has a cocaine charge with people you've met before, right? The chances are they'd say yes. That's one thing that we could say. Or to the other person about cocaine, right? Because your son used cocaine, right? Do you feel like you would be able to be neutral based on your previous feelings? And in both cases, especially the second one, because we asked them if they could be neutral, and they're probably going to have to say no, well, then that further solidifies our argument. The final one, it says this: you want them to agree that it might affect their ability to stay on a verdict or stay on the jury. And so your views about someone charged with this drug crime, would your views about someone charged with a drug crime affect your ability to be neutral juror on this case, right? If they say yes, cool. If they say no, well, then you still go to the final thing. We ask the judge, right, if a person can be kicked off the jury. And if the judge says yes, well, then they should be ideally kicked off the jury, right? So now technically you know what your trial is about, right? Your trial is about, the Lord Capulet yelling at his daughter for child abuse, right? And so if child abuse is the charge for Lord Capulet, then I want you to look at this giant list and you're going to try to think about who would be a person that you would want kicked off in that case, right? If it was about substance abuse, well, I know there's one girl who drink, right? If it was a substance abuse case, well, then I think I would kick Deborah off the case because she's a heavy social drinker, right? But we don't know what these people are good at, what they stand for, but you would want to think on this entire list, who would be most likely to give a verdict against your side, and that's the person you want kicked off, okay? That is what you are doing for this sheet. You are voir diring, and I expect to see it in your folder. All right, thank you very much.